The Drake C line was introduced in the early 1970s and was very popular immediately. It consisted of the R4C receiver and the T-4XC transmitter. Two VFOs allowed separate transmit and receive for DX work or transceive operation with either VFO. This was selectable from the front panel of the T-4XC. As each position is selected, a blue colored dial is lighted. As you see now, in the split or separate position, both dials are lit. In the first transceive position, the receiver VFO is lit, and in the second transceive position, the transmitter VFO is lit. And of course, back to separate mode, both dials are lit. When in separate mode, a spot switch on the transmitter is available. This allows you to spot the signal that you want to tune in, tune the VFO down to get the right beat note that you want, and go back, and then you're on frequency to work your station. The C line provided a great station for both SSB and CW operation. It is still in use today by many operators. In this segment, we're going to talk about more features of the Drake T-4XC transmitter. One of the most important items is the VFO, or PTO as it's called in the Drake, for permeability tuned oscillator. As was mentioned before, it has resolution down to 1 kilohertz, or KC as we used to call it, for kilocycles. In fact, with the crystal calibrator that's available in the receiver, you can get it much finer than 1 KC, and works very well. It's very smooth all the way across the band. It is very stable after about a 30-minute warm-up. And usually when I come home from work, I turn on the Drake C line the first thing. After changing clothes and a couple of household duties, it's ready to go. I frequently have QSOs with another station using a modern rig, and after 30 to 45 minutes of working, they are amazed at not having to tune my signal. It's that stable a rig. When paired with a Drake receiver, you have the ability to operate separate for DX work or in CW work. I like to be able to adjust the receive frequency without having to move the transmit frequency. You can also transceive with this control here with either VFO. This is the receive VFO. If you notice, the light goes out. The light indicates which VFO is in control of the transceive frequency. It has a vernier on the tune control for RF tune for easy tuning. That makes it a lot easier to peak your signal and get it right where you want it. There's also a front panel crystal switch for 4 additional 500 KC band segments other than the ones that are included with the rig. Also has a front panel socket which allows fixed frequency operation. Let's take a look at tuning the Drake T-4XC. I've already peaked the output, and if you look at the Bird 43 watt meter, you'll see it's on the top scale of running about 120 watts out. Now typically the output on this is anywhere from about 100 watts on some of the upper bands down to up to about 135 watts on 75 or 160. Now this is really kind of an old set of finals, and if you put a new set of finals in it, you should get, you know, a good little bit more power than that, but that's plenty adequate for operating on the HF bands, especially in CW mode. Now to operate sideband, like any other time, you're probably going to need an amplifier, but it still does a pretty fair job in barefoot mode. This is where the RF tune control with its vernier feature is important. As you can see, a small adjustment dramatically affects the power output, and that's where the vernier is real important. It's pretty easy to tune up with a watt meter attached, and that allows you to peak the power output by alternating between the plate control and the load control. You can maximize the output. And again, this is important to get this set properly, the tune control. After you've got everything adjusted, of course you don't have to operate at full power. You can merely adjust the gain back and operate, I'll say around half power. 50 watts output works pretty well for a lot of QSOs with reasonable band conditions. And you can back it down and get down to pretty close to QRP levels if you want to. Now that may not be the most efficient position, but it's possible. Transmitter has built-in Vox for both SSB operation and allows for semi-break-in operation on CW. One thing I like is a separate rear panel control for the Vox delay. There's a control for the CW Vox delay and also one for SSB. And you can actually in a QSO hear between letters. And it's I keep both a hand key and a keyer attached. A lot of straight key work these days through the SKCC, and depends on what the station wants to do, and it's easy to move back and forth between the two and makes for very smooth operation in CW mode. Don't have the microphone connected, but it works very well in sideband. You get excellent reports with this rig, and it works very well with a linear amplifier. One thing you have to be sure you have with this is a separate AC power supply. The Drake AC4 is used with the T-4XC transmitter. It's a separate item. One feature of that particular power supply is it has a connection where you can run a control line from the power supply to a linear amplifier so that you can have either push to talk or Vox control. That's about it for most of the features of the Drake T-4XC transmitter. It's great when paired with the Drake 4C receiver, and it also works with other receivers as well. In a moment we'll take a look at some of the rear panel connections. On the rear panel of the T-4XC we have a lot of flexibility through various connectors and controls. There's a separate jack for the microphone and the key. The Vox gain and Vox anti-gain controls. Also the separate Vox delay controls for both CW and SSB and AM that were mentioned earlier. There's the main antenna connector, which is a standard SO239. Also two connections here for the receive antenna and the mute line. These are the other connections to the receiver. 4 more jacks here. One thing to watch out for is the cable for the injection line and the carrier oscillator line. These require a special cable and not a standard phono cable, which can be used for the other connections. A complete set of cables is usually available on eBay for about $25. Finally, there is the connector going to the AC4 power supply. Well, that's about it for the Drake T-4XC transmitter. It has a very smooth and stable VFO, as we have seen, and has excellent output. It works well, of course, with the Drake R4C receiver and other receivers as well. Thanks for viewing.